like to introduce you to Laura to give some background on her story. Laura?
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share Connor's story, and then I'll pass it to Karrie to share Erik's. So just to, what happened with Connor. I'll share kind of the day it happened and a little bit about Connor himself. Connor lost his life to fentanyl in 2021, so he was 17 years old, and he was 4.0 AP student. He went to Cathedral Catholic High School. He was part of the football team. Real hard worker. Really wanted to always do best in everything he did. And he was like any other teenager. He just liked school, sports. So one thing though, Connor was a typical teenager, typical kid, loved his friends, loved life. But internally, he dealt with anxiety. And so with that, I was seeking professional help. He had a therapist, but unfortunately, on May 4th, Connor obtained a pill from a drug dealer. This was a student in the school, so not someone he'd called up on, on his phone, but it was a student that said he was his friend, and then he was trying to help him with his anxiety. On May 5th, before he went to school, he took that pill, and within minutes he died. So with Connor, he didn't overdose on a handful of pills. He didn't take drugs. He did experiment as a typical teenager. And like I said, he was dealing with this anxiety. So he took that one pill. It was laced with fentanyl, and that took his life. So I hope sharing Connor's story shows the crisis that we're dealing with, and I hope you all can help us as a mom and as a parent in dealing with this crisis. So I'll hand it over to Karrie.
Laura, can I just chime in, because I know when we talked about this workshop, did you talk about marijuana use at all?
I did.
Tell us what you were talking about in that conversation.
Sure. So like I mentioned, Connor did experiment. One thing with the legalization of marijuana, unfortunately, that started the problem. When it was legalized, his thinking, which I think a lot of teenagers feel this way, is it's legal. It's legal, and it helps me, it calms me down. And he shared that with me, because when I did see, and I did know he had taken marijuana, I, obviously as a parent, I confronted him with it and said, this is not going to help you, and this is going to be lead you down that gateway of other drugs. I said, nope, it's not going to happen, Mom. But that's kind of where we had that heart-to-heart on his anxiety. And I said, we need to look at other safe options to help with your situation and that's what I'm going to do. And so, but what that happened, because of that understanding of it being legal, did not help. But this, unfortunately, it was too late. He already had the connections. He already had a connection with that drug dealer. And that drug dealer preyed on him. Okay, now you got caught with the marijuana. Let me give you something that no one will smell. No one will know about. No one can barely test these days. And then that was it. So.
Thank you, Laura. I mean, this whole conversation is to educate us as media advocates, because we're constantly told it's not a gateway or anything like that. So we'll get into that. I want to go to Karrie Eric's mom, to talk and check out, the t-shirt on Karrie. Karrie, could you share your story?
Yes, of course. And I haven't put anything in the chat yet because I don't really know how to do this well on my phone. So if I have to afterwards, I can send some information or different stuff that I think would be helpful if I'm not able to figure out this chat, doing it on the phone. Eric's story, let me first start by saying Erik was the absolute love of my life. And he played team sports his whole life, literally like was a walking sports encyclopedia. In his sophomore year, he got injured playing sports, and like most kids that play sports, and how this opiate crisis started with kids that played sports, is he was prescribed opiates. And then at that point, it wasn't like the problem started right away, but that was the opening to the door, because then he decided he didn't want to play sports anymore. Well, when kids that play sports their whole life basically have no free time to do anything but practice, play sports, school, he was given a choice. If you're not going to play sports, then you're going to get a job, but you're not going to just have a bunch of free time. Well, that still didn't help the fact that all the kids that he used to hang around with, we knew everybody. They were all on teams. They all kind of were monitored. Everybody knew. Well, now that he's not playing sports, you start veering away from those type of friends and you start meeting other friends. And like Laura said, well, the drug dealer wasn't what people think, some shady guy hanging out on the corner. It was the kid sitting in school with him. And it's also Snapchat, the internet. So, you know, for people anymore to think that you can point out who a drug dealer is anymore, I'm telling you right now, it's either your kid or it's the kid your kid is going to school with. It's not the shady guy you see on TV or in movies that they try to portray. So by the time he graduated high school, he was 18 at the time when he graduated, and it was evident there was a problem, but he got into bodybuilding, so we thought maybe that was, you know, over with. Well, then he got hurt while he was bodybuilding, and he went back to what he knew during that time and started doing the opiates. At that point, I couldn't force him to get into rehab. I couldn't force him to do anything, because after kids are 18, you really, as a parent, you can't do anything. So it got way out of hand. And for as much as I tried to do everything humanly possible, and just let me give you a little bit of a background. I was a junkie for 25 years, so I know the other side of it too. And I did everything possible to steer him not in that direction, but my message didn't come across that way to him, I guess. So when he was 21, it got really bad to the point where I basically had to go to this house that he was renting a room from and basically kick in the door and kidnap him. And I gave him two choices. I said, you are either going to go to rehab or you're going to tell me what street corner you want to live on, and that's where you're going to live, period. So reluctantly, he went to rehab, but again, it was his own choice. I did not realize that the day I dropped him off at rehab would be the last day I saw him alive, literally. 86 days in, I get a phone call from the rehab, which was on June 5th, 2020, saying that he was leaving and some girl was picking him up. I knew nothing about that. June 12th, he died from fentanyl poisoning, which was exactly 1 week after he got out of rehab in a stranger's home. And we found him the next day. It took me 2.5 years to get his phone back from the NTF. And in his phone, as I went through it, mind you, the phone was not even 2 weeks old, because I took everything he had and I hacked into everything. I deleted everything because, again, I didn't know my son was going to die. So I didn't want him to be able to have these contacts. So his phone was about 2 weeks old, if that. And there was 3 different people that he asked to purchase drugs from. Not one of them was fentanyl. I'm not saying his choices were right, But again, he didn't purchase fentanyl. He died from cocaine and fentanyl acute intoxication, which means he died from fentanyl, because it takes a whole lot more cocaine that was in his system for him to have died from what they're saying that it was. So that's why I like to point out that, when somebody dies from fentanyl poisoning, it's murder. It's not an overdose. It's not an accidental overdose. You don't accidentally overdose on fentanyl if you're taking something else. It's murder. And so basically that's where I stand, and I try to advocate as much as I can and speak about it as much as I can, again, because I know both sides of it. I know the side of being a drug addict, and when I was used, it was a junkie, and now it's substance abuse disorder. And it is a disorder, and people need to realize that, because people don't wake up and go, I want to be a junkie today, and that's their goal. And so that's kind of my story. I'm sorry if I get a little bit aggravated, but I get very angry sometimes when I have to speak about this, because it's a human crisis and people aren't seeing it as that.
You shouldn't apologize at all. I just want to let you know that. And I also want to let you know that we as media advocates want to learn from you. And I'm going to open it up to questions, but I have one that always kind of is very sensitive, is how do we as media advocates reach out to people that have suffered a loss like this in a compassionate way in order to tell the story? How do we do that? It's very difficult for us to just get a phone number and say, oh, hello, so what are some tips for us as media advocates to engage people who have gone through something so devastating and yet try to tell your story? So anyone who wants to go first, Laura or Karrie?
Laura, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Karrie, feel free.
Well, I think that for me, since I've done a bunch of the different things, and I'm tied in with a bunch of different advocacy groups, it's probably easier to reach out to somebody like me. It wasn't like that probably in the beginning, but again, I've been telling my story since I got sober in 2005, but I didn't think I was going to tell the story about have to tell the story about my child. What I think the media or advocates need to realize is that losing a child is a lot different than losing a loved one to a drug overdose. And so maybe even approaching in the sense that ask about that child, because remember, when you talk to other people about their kids, you ask about their kids' lives and what they do. Laura's son and my son, they were more than this struggle. Erik was more than his addiction, and he did other things in his life. Who he was and where he was in his life are two different things, and people have to realize that. But again, all you can do is, if you reach out to somebody, they can either say yes or no. You just have to really realize if you're reaching out to a parent that's buried their child or somebody who's buried a loved one.
Karrie, how soon after were you ready to talk publicly?
I think I spoke right away because I was very angry, and I started kind of doing my own investigating or research, and was reaching out. So I was reaching out to a lot of county officials and different people, telling my story in emails over and over, and reaching out. And then at work, really, I didn't say anything to anybody for about a month. Nobody really knew anything except for my supervisor and stuff, because I know that it's very uncomfortable. People don't know what to say. Yeah. And then they say really weird, odd stuff. And I would, I've had people tell me, well, I had a pet that was like a child. I know how you feel. No, you don't. You don't know how I feel. And unless you've buried your child, you will never know how I feel. And I don't want you to ever know. I'm in a club I didn't ask to be a part of, and I can never get out of it. And so it's easier to ask what your child was like rather than how I am. And if you can't really think of something to say, just don't say anything, because otherwise weird stuff comes out. And it's very uncomfortable for everybody, you know, not just me, it's uncomfortable for the person that's acting weird. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much for sharing that, you know, and I understand the person's trying to, you know, equate losing something, but you know, the totally different. But Laura, can you tell us how we can reach out to you in a compassionate way? And also, when were you ready to speak publicly?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what Karrie said is, we don't want you to relate or try to relate. And I know that you're trying to, you know, empathize but that's not probably the angle you want to take. It's more, you want to, you know, we always want to celebrate our child. And so we want to talk about all the good things. We don't want to talk about the day he died or where he's buried, right? And so you need to take that kind of approach. And also that to encourage them to speak, because for me, it was to tell the truth. Because I think, again, we have the stigma, we all know that, we have the perception, and we have to break it, that it's not some, you know, shady guy, like Karrie said. They're sitting next to your child, and sadly enough, it's unfortunate, but that's the world we're living in now. Not, you know, and we know that there's someone upstream, you know, tapping into these kids to sell in these schools, and that's a bigger issue. But we have to be more aware. And so if you talk to others that have lost their child, is for them to encourage them to speak, to tell the truth. The truth needs to be told. And so when Connor passed, it's like, I thought everyone's just like, oh, well, Connor, well, he made a bad choice. He had a problem. No, yes, he made a bad choice. But what do we need to do to make sure, you know, other children don't? Their minds are developing. They're still choosing what's the right choice and the bad, and the, you know, what's right and wrong. I mean, he's 17 years old. So I think that kind of empowered me to speak, you know, as soon as possible, within a month or so, because I wanted people to know what really happened. And so, it wasn't an overdose. He wasn't, you know, driving to like, I just want to do drugs every day and I want to pop pills. It wasn't that. And I wanted everyone to know really what happened. So that's why I speak out.
Thank you so much. I have a bunch of questions, but I do want to open it up. If you raise your hand to anybody that may have a question. If not, I'm going to keep going, because I think it's really important. No questions. So both of you touched on this sort of, but the stigma around the use, you know, you both have mentioned that my son has not been a longtime user of hard substances, you know, and to try and get the media to understand that this was one pill and it was one decision. So can you talk about the stigma around trying to get the media to understand that your children were not seeking it around the corners and all places? How do you deal with that?
Laura, or do you want me to go?
Well, I just have very few words about that. I just think, again, it's just encouraging more families to speak. I think, you know, it's difficult, and you can explain, you know, every day, you know, telling the story in various with various audiences is tough. But I think it's just we need more stories. Yeah. We need more stories, and we need more awareness. So that's the only way to break it, I think. And so I think that, you know, there are a small group that do speak that I cross paths all the time in these various forums like today, but we just need more of them.
Yes.
Because then I think what's going to happen is that those families are going to say, it's okay, I'm in a safe space, I am going to be supported, I can seek help, I can try to, you know, find out ways to help, and maybe even not only that, but to help those other families that haven't gotten to that point, right? That's, we want to do more preventative maintenance, right? We want to stop it. So I think having maybe some stories too of survivors. I've gone to some events where I've heard parents are like, this is what I did, and my child is still alive today. We want to hear those too, because that's where we want to be able to say, yeah, this is what you can do, and that you can seek help out there, and there's other families that know the right, you know, the right tools to save their child.
And people are reaching out to you, right? You said they're reaching out, and you're saying it's okay to do media, and this is some tips on how I do it, you know, and that's an awesome thing, you know. Erik, sorry,
That's all
Karrie.
right. Well, for me, I believe stigma comes with either, I'll be nice about it, lack of knowledge, ignorance, or selfishness, because most people, stigma is based on judgment. And when somebody's judging somebody, are they judging them based on their opinion or based on the truth? And that's where stigmas come from. If you don't know what it's like to suffer from substance abuse disorder, how can you make a judgment on somebody else that has that problem? You can have an opinion because of what you see on TV or what you heard or what somebody told you, but do you know the truth about that person's life, or the truth about why they're where they are? So stigma, I believe, you know, how to break stigma or help people understand different things that they have no knowledge about, is by educating them and by speaking out. And if you can educate yourself, then you could educate others, or speak to people who have gone through that same thing. You know, a prime example is people always want to have a comment about people who are in abusive situations. Well, if I was, I would have. No, you wouldn't. You don't know what you would have done because you're not in that situation. It sounds good, but until you live that situation, you don't know what you're going to do, and you can't tell somebody else how it is for them if you don't know. And so again, I think education, educating others and educating yourself if you need more education about different aspects. So again, it's just about judgment. It's opinion. It's somebody's opinion rather than the truth. And so that's where I stand on that.
Thank you, Karrie. We're going to open it up to questions. We have Kelly, and then Bernard, and then John. Kelly?
Thanks. And Laura and Karrie, I've worked with you both at events. You're wonderful. So great to see you today. And thanks for being here. I know you're seasoned with speaking to media, but for somebody who may be starting out in your position, what could we as media advocates do to help people like yourselves feel prepared and more what I'm trying to say, to help you better prepare for speaking to the media, because it can be very nerve-wracking, and especially if it's TV and you know, they've got the lights and you don't know what they're going to ask or what their angle for the story is going to be necessarily. So how can we as advocates help you better prepare and feel comfortable in interview situations?
Well, I would say the first thing is to let the people know that however long they're speaking to the media, it's not going to look like that when you see it. So you have to be very precise, or let them know these are the specific things that no matter what else you may put in, I want this specific thing to be in there. Or I would like to make sure, can you make sure this is included if you don't include anything else? But to let them know that the time you spend with the media isn't the time that's on a snippet. you know, and so you know, for me, the two things that I always want to make very clear is it is very important for me that Erik's name is always spelled correctly, because for me, that was my son and that's the name I gave him. That is very important. The other thing is I do not want it ever to be that you say it was an accidental overdose, because fentanyl poisoning is murder, and I want that to be very clear. And so, and you know, and the other ones about Narcan and different things, but that's a whole nother subject, because people still feel like the Narcan is you're promoting drug use. But again, they just need to know that all that talking in the end isn't going to be all that talking. You know, it's going to be a short little snippet.
Mhm.
Laura?
Yeah, I agree. I've spoken enough where I spent like 20 minutes telling my story, and it's fine. You know, I know what they, you know, a lot of the newscasters are trying to get the point across, and they usually get like 10 minutes on that, you know, blurb that night on the 10 o'clock news or whatever. So I understand that is critical. Just in preparation to answer your question, Kelly, is just knowing the audience and knowing the purpose. What is the focus? I know that Connor's story is important, but I don't think that's the key. The key is the takeaways. What do you do? What are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone feels sad, but I'm not there to be the victim or to get pity. I'm there because I just want it to be a wake up call. Like, wow, this is not good. This is not good. This is happening again and again and again to children, right? So I want to always get my point across too. But then just on preparing is, because sometimes I get an email and just say, hey, can you show up, Friday night at 6 o'clock? I can, and I'll drive as far as LA to go to it. I'm committed, but I need to know what do you want me to talk about? How long? So sometimes it's, what would you do as a parent if you were able to start over, go back? Well, I wish I was educated. I wish I took it a little more seriously. I wish I, and not to tell these regrets or just that I'm to blame, but to say these are the things as parents need to do. So sometimes I will get that's going to be the focus, Laura, is what do parents need to do? What do parents need to know? How do they talk to their child? What are the signs that they need to see there is something like I think Karrie said, is there's another kid in the club, right? You move them away, but those kids are still there. And is this new kid in the group? And that was a sign I should have caught, is all of a sudden where did this boy come from? I didn't know him. I didn't know his parents, right? So anyways, that's kind of just what's going to be the topic. And again, if it's children, because I went to one, I think that's when I met you, Kelly, it was 80% children, not parents. Well, then for me to talk about what a parent should do, that I'm going to lose these children, I had to say, your friend sitting next to you, you need to be their hero. You need to help them. You need to have the conversations peer to peer. You need to say, hey, you don't want to take that pill at that party. Hey, you don't want to make this choice. But they need to be heroes within each other, within the peers themselves, and within that friendship, and that trust, and have that trust. So knowing it was kids, then it's going to be a different focus. So I think just knowing the audience and knowing the time.
Yeah, and I think, little nuances like, is there enough parking? What's my audience? Like, help me out here a little bit. Where is it gonna be? What time does it end? How many minutes am I speaking? Do you want me to prepare some kind of a presentation? Like, give me something, to help me out. John, you have a question?
Yeah. Your son's stories were similar to mine, not the same, but similar. But Monday night, I was at National Night Out, and we had a table, and each person had to come around, and they had a little scorecard, and we had to mark them off that they came to our booth. If they didn't have that, they would just walk by. But trying to give information about fentanyl out, I had parents telling me, well, that's, my kid will never do that. What do we say to those parents? Because we know that things, their influences out in their friends and in the community are impactful to them. Not as much as parents, but they are impactful to those students. And it was just a little disheartening that they wouldn't even take any information about it.
I can answer that real quick and then I'll pass it to Laura. What they need to know is your kid may not be the kid that's going to do it, but their friend is going to be the one that gives them the drugs that have fentanyl in it. So it's and again, it's not being educated. And it also comes with parents don't want to believe it's their kid, or it's shameful, or they're turning a blind eye. And they're as much as the problem is, because they are not educated on the fact your kid may not do it, but that doesn't mean his friend isn't going to buy something or get something from somebody who doesn't care what's in that. And your friend is not, their friends aren't chemists and they're not pharmacists. And so if it's not something that is given to you from a doctor, if it comes from the street, no matter what it is, 99% of the time it is going to have fentanyl, and your kid doesn't have to be struggling with substance abuse disorder. Your kid just has to be somebody who decided to make a bad choice at the wrong time. And that's what, it is not it's not a societal thing. It's not a financial thing. It doesn't discriminate. It is hitting all populations. It is literally a human crisis. And I've told people, believe me, if you have not buried somebody you love yet, you will. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so, but it is very hard to give people information that don't believe that it's a problem, and that's what it is. It's not even that they don't believe their kid isn't going to do it. They really don't believe it's a problem.
I tried to tell him about the young man in Escondido who actually Instagrammed his friend saying that he had just taken one of those pills.
Oh, the wrestler, right?
Yeah, and nobody said anything.
No, nothing. It's very sad. Their friend's silence is also helping kill their friends.
The friend said don't take it, but they didn't follow up.
Because again, in society, we are focusing more on what somebody's eating or somebody's court case, or we don't like that some company puts somebody to advertise something for them. That's what's important in society. But we're not worrying about the actual people who are struggling and suffering from substance abuse disorder, mental health disorder, gun violence. I mean, it goes on and on, because other things, social media things, are more important than actual problems that we are facing as humans in the United States right now.
Laura, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I can see, if I had it, if you kind of broach the subject with me, John, I would struggle to come over and have a conversation. I think it's just it again, it's the lack again of education and just understanding. But I think it's just that we need to take a different approach. I think it needs to start more in our schools, because that's I think when we get older, yes, I'm not saying that you know, if you die and you're 30, that it was it was their choice, and I'm not saying that, but the point is it needs to start when they're younger, because that's when it starts, right? And then it spirals, right? And then like Erik, it was 21, so, but we got to start from when they're younger, and we got to start with those parents that are with, where we're partnering with those parents, and then really educating the child as well as the parents. And yeah, we might have to be, have to be more enforced than an option. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think it's just that if we don't do that, then yeah, we just need to, we want to avoid that. The only people that come up to us now, right, or the ones that already, it's too late, they already lost, and they're, because you tend to relate, like me and Karrie, we relate, right? But what we need to do is try to really focus on educating those parents that are not part of our club. And that's where I think that's where the school system is probably the better way than maybe these other kind of workshops. Just an idea. And I know it is a focus for San Diego, but I think we just need to continue to really hit home. I think that's where we can make a difference.
Yeah, and it's good to know, Laura. I think because of both of your advocacy and continuing to talk, we are talking about a curriculum in schools at younger age, healthy choices, because we get a lot of pushback when some people use the rhetoric, oh, it's just say no. This is not just say no. This is life skills. This is how to say no. This is building healthy, sports and going to the gym and all around health. This is not just say no. So, this new Project Alert that they're working on could possibly be that, but it is amazing how many parents aren't aware that there's no drug prevention curriculum going on at all. And there hasn't been for many years. That funding went away in 2008. So here and there, what you see on this forum right now are people that will go in sporadically, like myself, and give a presentation once a year. But there's been no uniform curriculum. So that's a real gap that we all need to start talking about. I want to go to Bernard.
Good morning, ladies. First of all, I want to thank you for being on with us this morning. And I'd also like to, congratulate Erik's mother, Karrie, for your years of sobriety. Congratulations. If you were to design a training for first-time sharers of their stories, so that we could have those people with lived experience go into classrooms or be part of an event that we do, or whatever, all the myriad things we do to advocate for media, for our initiatives and regions. How would you design it, and where would you go to let people know that this training is available in the event that they want to speak out on these issues? What would go into the training?
Laura, I'll let you start.
Oh, go ahead. No, I have to think about that one.
Yeah, that one's a good one. The first place would be obviously the media to get it out more. We would also, I think that there should be more billboards up around, not just for the 6 weeks or 8 weeks that they're up. There should be billboards. There should be the digital billboards. It should also be, like you said, the schools. It should be passed out in the schools, not as a, does the parent want this to happen? It should be part of curriculum, and for first time share, oh, that's hard because, sometimes you have to be really patient and let them know that if something is triggering them during something, that it's okay to stop. And, I get extreme anxiety before each one of every time before I speak. I'm sick to my stomach the day before, the day of, the day after. I'm a babbling idiot sometimes because I have so much anxiety, but so much in my head that I want to get out, that you just have to realize that sometimes it is very triggering for some people, and they're not ready, even if they think they're ready. But I think that the media, to put it out more in a sensitive, not like Joe said, say no to drugs, because that's not really what it is. It is about choices, and the kids at very early ages need to know now, because social media blasts this stuff, and it makes it look like this lifestyle or these things are great. And kids, I don't think that kids, when you look around, I'll go somewhere to eat and I'll see somebody with their 3 or 4-year-old kid, and their kid's got a tablet or is on a phone. And how are those things possible? So if they're gonna, if places are gonna blast out the things that are detrimental to us, why can't we put in the same effort to blast out the things that would bring education and awareness to people? You know, I don't know if companies can decide, if people can decide they don't like who a company has advertising for their stuff, and they basically shut down that whole company. Why can't we do that to advocate for these sort of things? You know, I don't know. I don't think I made a lot of sense. So I
No, that actually you did make a lot of sense, because I just out of what you just indicated right now, some of the things that we might cover if we were to provide a training, one would be people like you who have been there and done that. That's number one, because we all know that the lived experience really is the most powerful presentation of the information that we all present, which is based in data and based in, you know, the latest studies or facts. But when you put a lived experience on top of it all starts to make more sense, especially the reality of it could happen to the child next door, it could happen to your child, it could happen to your grandchild, and right on down the line. So what I got out of you saying was, one, have people that are willing to speak on the subject who have been there and done that. Two, give some public speaking training to people who want to become community advocates, so that we would have things in that curriculum that would talk about the environment that you're going to be speaking in, so that it's not a surprise. The anxiety or the nervousness, which is completely natural in any public speaking situation. Some people think I can't do this because I'm nervous. Actually, the nervousness, if you know how, can be used to your advantage. You could have a section on triggering. Look, we're talking about things that are going to bring up a lot of emotions. And so we're going to talk about what those things might be, but also how to bring yourself back to center. So those could be two components of that section, how to bring yourself back to center. You talked about social media. It's one thing to look at social media and to take it all in and to be stunned by it, or to be shocked by it, or to be angered by it. But it's another thing to know how to leverage what social media to get your message out, so that you can combat that, right? So that you can do it in such a way that's non-confrontational, but still impactful. So to train people to do that, who have lived experience, I think would be very important. And then also a section to understand the media. You know, look at, this is who you're talking to today, a radio reporter. This is how long the report's going to last. This is how long your soundbite's going to be. You're talking to a broadcast news reporter today. You're going to be on live TV. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to feel like. We're going to practice this right now. You're talking to a print reporter. This is what this interview is going to look like. Both of you have been there. You know, they're all completely different. But giving them training in those areas will give them some sort of sense of what to expect and how to handle it. So out of your answer, Karrie, came all of those great points. So I just wanted to encapsulate it for you. And I'm anxious to hear what Laura has to say.
Yeah, so yeah, I kind of feel the same way that Karrie. I mean, it's tough every time. But again, when I'm done with it, I feel better. I feel better about it. Like it really, I know I even if I don't, I only talk to, 20 people like today, small, I feel I made a difference. I feel good. Like I did something to help someone potentially. I helped, and hopefully what you all, take from this, it makes a difference. So that's what I walk away assuming that. And that's why I say, I know I can do this and I'm going to do it because I think it's going to be a change for the better. But preparation, yes. So one thing I used to I would write it out and, revise it. But what I learned is you just got to talk from the heart and don't be too scripted, because then you get yourself more, because you're trying to stay on cue and you don't need to be on cue. Tell them, yeah, you want your points so that you don't just, start to, go off on a tangent, but you can just really talk from the heart. And so, I used to do it very scripted, and then I started to fumble. And then one of them, I just said, no, I'm just going to get up there. I'm going to have my paper, but I'm going to look out in that audience and I'm going to try to hit home. I'm going to try to connect. And then it was just so much easier. I just felt like, yeah, I'm just going to tell how I feel, why this is important. And then it was easier. So I think that's, again, just, to let them to just know that you're in an environment that no one's judging you. It's what you're going to share is really going to help. And we're there, with you where we know it's tough. I know that some of you have shared your stories, and maybe before the meeting, always have a pre-meeting like you did last week, because now I know your faces and then I trust you and I have confidence because you're not just a stranger all of a sudden on a screen.
Yeah.
But I know that all of you are doing this because not to get rich, right? I think Bernard said that, or Joe, but because this is something that is making a difference, and you want to be part of it. That makes me feel even better to show up, right? And that you all live it. You have families, you have children, you have struggles, and that you're in it because of that on a personal level, but because you on a day-to-day, that's your job too. But it's not only because it's your job. And knowing that gives me a little more confidence to show up and say, I'm here with people that are real, and they're here to support me. And then I have more confidence.
Such great advice. And the other thing you mentioned earlier was the finished product with the media is going to look a lot different than the hour and a half that they edited. I've done interviews. They were here for an hour and I got one blurb. It was like I blinked and I was off. I said, what happened to all this good stuff?
Yeah.
It's called background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I got out of yours, Laura, was that one, we could have a section on preparation, how to prepare, how to get ready for this interview by understanding what kind of interview it is, how to take short little keywords and turning them into this next section, which I got out of it, how to be extemporaneous. And then out of being extemporaneous, how to stay on message. That would be the next thing. We train how to stay on message, understand what your job is that day or what you're trying to convey that day while still being extemporaneous about it. And then lastly, something we really didn't think about, but is very true. I know that as a former reporter, it was extremely difficult sometimes to deal with the aftermath of doing an interview with someone who had just suffered a great loss or suffered a great pain. And for the reporter, it can be hard. It was for me. I can't imagine how hard it is for somebody who's just bared their soul in honor of someone they love, and then having to go home alone, right? So maybe we also have a section on how to deal with the post-interview feelings that may come up, including the positive ones that you mentioned. So I appreciate that. Thank you both for that. That helps me a lot to design an outline for maybe a training that we can collaborate on together.
And to add just one more thing to that is who you choose as well. So I have another son, and one thing he says, he's, you know, very proud of me that I do this. So, but I asked him if he would speak, and he said he would. And he's 22, but having a brother, losing a brother, but I think you should pick not only the parents, but having another sibling is good too, because I think that really sends a message too. It's like, this isn't just a mom and a dad that lost their child. It's the children, the siblings, the friends, the community. This is huge, you know, and I think that when you have those other folks speak, it then kind of, I think then you're gonna impact more than just a mom to a mom, right? It's gonna be a brother to another brother that is going through that, and then they might have a connection. So one thing is Dave, who lost Jake, is a couple that speaks all the time, and his other son is speaking with my son, and so they're talking to say, how do I deal with this when someone comes to me, and my son only had one brother? How do you deal with conversations is when someone says, oh, do you have any brothers or sisters? And Ryan's like, well, what do I say, Mom? Do I say, yeah, but he's not here? What do I say? I don't want to be in that uncomfortable situation. I'm just a 22-year-old college kid that just wants to get through the next day. But having that support group is helping him to handle those situations, those awkward situations. But that has helped to have those, you know, those connections and contacts. So
Yeah, that's another great, the last point would be, you know, who to trust, not only in the media, but in the circles that surround you. So thank you again, both of you, for that.
So that's a time where I had to like take a breath. Pause.
Yeah. No worries at all. John, and then Kelly.
Yeah, we have a board member, and he's the executive director of Oceanside's Chamber of Commerce, and he lost his son. And we had a large presentation at Oceanside High School. Yep. Where the DA put it on, and you could see him up on the stage, and he was this was the first time, and you could see it in his face how scared he was. And when it came his time, he did a great job. And then afterwards, he was all smiles and saying, this was great. He goes, I want to do it more. He was so enthusiastic about it afterwards. I think it really helped him. And this is for Bernard. Bernard, if you know, reporters do their thing, if you say to the reporter, if you're going to use one main point, use this one, would they do that?
I don't know if Bernard's on, he might have had to step away, but I can tell you from my experience, it's 50-50. You know, you never know. But Bernard, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I mean, you can request anything that you want. One of the things that we might provide in a training to someone who's messaging out there with lived experience is to understand that you have the opportunity and the right to ask a reporter, what's your angle? You know, what is your angle? And then based on what their angle is for a particular story, you can then decide whether or not you want to participate or not. So asking them, will you include this, is a fair question as well. It doesn't mean that they will. This is where the who to trust thing comes in.
Yeah.
If you have a reporter who you feel is trustworthy and they say, yes, I will include this information, then by all means, you know, portray it to them. If you don't have someone who's honest, but they say they'll do it, and then they don't, now you know who to trust, right? So, and then if you have somebody who says, you know what, I won't have room for this because this is what I'm focusing on, there's another honest reporter. So you can always ask anything, including the most important thing, which is what's your angle? Tell me what you're reporting on. And that way you can make a decision about whether you participate or not and how you participate.
Yeah, back at the beginning of the marijuana thing, there was one reporter for the union, and he wanted, because I spoke at the planning commission for the supervisors, he wanted a quote from me. I said, no, because you're going to give me one sentence and you're going to do the whole story on the marijuana folks. You're not balanced to do both sides. So I refused to give him anything.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, and even the public speaking is doing it over and over again. I think honestly, you learn more by doing. And, you know, by having that interview, you said, well, wait a minute, this isn't what I agreed to do, the final story that you produced. So really, you got to ask those questions beforehand. You really got to prime, you know, am I right now being recorded, you know, by what I'm saying? Because as soon as they walk in the office, I had a reporter here, I know I'm on record. So I got to be really careful with anything I say. But Kelly, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to thank Laura for mentioning her 22-year-old son as a potential speaker, because that made a light bulb go off for me. I know we're often talking about, especially, you know, when we're trying to put together a program for example, high school students, you know, to have somebody young who's more like a peer who can speak to them. And there's a lot of hesitancy, and, you know, rightfully so in many cases, about having somebody who is a former drug user come and talk to them. You know, high school principals are afraid that they're going to say something that might glorify drugs or, you know, what have you. But having a sibling who experienced that loss and pain gives that kind of peer-aged connection without having somebody who has been a drug user. So that's a really great idea. If, you know, if there are siblings who are comfortable enough doing that. Just my comment on
Yeah.
that. That was a really good suggestion.
Yes, it was. And John, you have another question?
I just want to piggyback on what Kelly said, the drug user. It's not regarding you ladies, but I really truly believe that you shouldn't ever use someone with less than 5 years of recovery. It puts them at danger if they're not, because people see them on TV and they go, you're a narc, what are you doing here? And plus, you got to vet them beforehand on what they're going to say. You know, I'm a person in recovery, and I never glorified my use. When I would tell them my time and they'd start to clap, I said, stop it. You know, don't clap for me that I did something stupid. And now I'm not. There's places I get claps, but not from you guys. You guys are doing the right thing and not using. I used one guy one time, and that's all we've used. It's really imperative not to use somebody with less than 5 years. That's early recovery. So thanks. Just
Thanks, John. We'll go to Marla and then we'll wrap it up. Marla, are you there? Your hand just
Yeah,
went.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. My camera's off because I'm not getting good reception, so I wanted to be able to hear the presentation. First of all, Karrie and Laura, thank you again just for your heart and your bravery and your commitment to support this process. And I think every person that is participating on this training really wants to do their very best and also be respectful to families and to mothers like yourself that has lost a loved one. So I want to bring up two comments. I personally am expanding on what John just said. I think that is an opportunity and a process to embrace all our community members, especially those with lived experience. I don't think it gives the wrong message. I appreciate what John's saying. We want to be sensitive so we don't jeopardize sobriety. There are some family members that recently lost a loved one that are very good, and others that probably aren't at that emotional state that can share their story yet. But I want to embrace everybody with those lived experiences to be able to share their story, because I think collectively that's how we make change and how we eliminate stigma.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, I don't want to keep us too long, but I do want to ask both of you, what are maybe 3 things that you want to leave with the media always? Whether they're resources, whether they're messages, what are those must-haves whenever you're speaking?
You mean to prepare ourselves for
No, I
this?
mean, what do you want the takeaways to be, like action items? I know you
Action,
talked about,
okay.
School-based curriculum.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Joe, you hit it on the head. I think that's where we need to start. Other forums, I think are good, but I think that is where the root problem starts, and it's at the younger, because that's when, the marijuana, and then that spirals, right? And it's when they're not making good choices because their minds are still developing. And so that's where I think we need to focus. That is, I think, going to make a huge difference. The other area the other point I want to make is that the media, in what Karrie said, is the more of the advertising. I am seeing that on various channels now, on the radio and on my phone, when I look at different things where it pops up about fentanyl, is good, but we need more. We need more. Just like with the smoking, we know that we see those, and they're good. They hit home. They hit home, like when you see that. And sometimes you've got to see that tragic picture to really get that message across. Yeah, okay, it's a scare tactic, but it works. And so that's the second thing I wanted to point out. And then the third is maybe, again, I think, Joe, you said is say no to drugs. Yeah. Well, why don't we look at it from, why did they get there? It's the wellness, it's the support, it's what is the root cause of them making the choice, right? It's not just say no and suck it up if you have anxiety, depression, my son, it's part of life. No, it's not, because they are dealing, this environment that we are in today is different than when we were kids, right? They have too many things where they have ability to be influenced on their phone, everywhere, right? And so that's another point is where we need to really focus on in regards to. That's my 3. So
and Laura, and we'll go to Karrie, but you mentioned a good point too. For a man, especially a teenage man, a teenage boy, to admit that they're anxious is a very tough thing. It almost attacks your masculinity, like, oh, I'm anxious, like, come on, suck it up. We have a very anxious group of kids coming up, and I don't know if it's social media, I don't know what it is, every school I go to, and we're seeing young men now cutting in schools that we had, to relieve the stress. And that's very unfortunate, but I think that anxiety issue is huge, and we got to nip it in the bud right there, in the teenage years. Feel free to talk about it. It's okay to be anxious. You know, it's not a male-female thing. Everybody's anxious, you know? Don't medicate with marijuana to make it worse, you know? And then we'll go to Karrie. Top 3 things you want to leave with the media to get out.
Well, to educate yourself, or for other people to educate themselves, and that it also has to start at all levels. It's not just us as adults educating ourselves. The education, like Laura said, needs to start, and as sadly now as in elementary school. I speak sometimes. I've spoken with Rocky Heron, who's an ex-DEA agent in high schools, but he speaks in middle schools and even some elementary schools, and that's where it's at. Another thing that I think is very important that maybe we didn't really touch on is that we need to focus on recovery for these people that are struggling. It is easier to buy drugs than it is to get recovery, and recovery shouldn't be only afforded to those that have money. It should be something where that's what we're trying to do, because in all actuality, we can continue to blame the supply, but it's the demand that is the problem for us in the United States. As long as we have the highest demand of any country in the world, of course, it's going to be supplied to here, because drugs are a business just like anything else is a business, and you're going to sell it to where the most people are buying it. So we need to make recovery or those sorts of things more accessible to the people that are really struggling and that really need it. And also, I believe that for as much as people, the Narcan isn't a be all end all, but it should be something that everybody has training on, and it is in somebody's house. Just like the people that are providing CPR training, they should also be providing Narcan training at the same time, and that it should be something, because it could happen to an elderly person. They could take too much of their medication, and if you had that Narcan there, it's not just for somebody who is abusing drugs, but it should be something that is taught even in the schools, that those sorts of things, along with the Good Samaritan law, you know, that should be something that more people should be aware of. You know, but those would be, I kind of, you know, again, I kind of babble sometimes, but you know, that would be my grouping: to educate yourself, but also make treatment, you know, rehabilitation and treatment more accessible, and also to, you know, get it out there that Narcan and the Good Samaritan law is something that every household should have. It may not happen to you, and if you're one of those fortunate people who this is never going to happen to you or your family, props to you. But you know what? It's, again, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen to somebody, you know, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And we need to start doing something about it here in the United States, and quit blaming everywhere else, and focus on everybody here and what we could do about the people here that are struggling.
Karrie, it's a great point that you said. The cartels would stop shipping all of this stuff if there wasn't the demand, because the amount of drugs we seize, you would think they would go out of business, but they keep doing it. So I just want to also mention that in our media advocacy, we are really trying to promote those resources. So tell the story, but also say the access and crisis line. Marla has several toolkits. You know, we all have these resources, so make sure we're promoting them at the end of the story. This is what happened. Please go here if you need help. 211, access and crisis line. All of those.
Never used alone.
Yep, anything you want to share, but you told your story. Now what do? We need some action. You know, hey, we need more prevention in schools. Go to the PTA meeting. If there's no prevention in schools, then you're going to go to every PTA meeting until they get prevention in schools. And that's just the way it's going to happen. So I really appreciate. Does anybody have any last comments? This was really awesome. And I thank you both for taking the time to speak with us. You're helping us in our work. And I know, is it okay if some of the media advocates can get in touch with you if they have a story they need? Because we're always putting out media and they're always asking for personal stories. And that's the one that's going to get the media hit. So we appreciate. John, you have anything to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we are doing presentations right now. The county has a grant and every coalition needs to do at least 10. I think we're gonna be ending up about 20. And we're doing them to different people than we usually talk to. We did one with the Apartment Managers Association in Vista. We're doing it at a school, we're doing it at churches, we're trying to get out there to all kinds of different folks. So we offer them food, $10 gift cards, and Narcan if they come to the presentation. Sometimes it takes that bribery, and we also give money to the organization for how many people they bring. So if there's like 25, they'll get $250. So,
John, can you say what organization you're with?
oh, I'm with North Coastal Prevention Coalition.
Vista Community Clinic. So
Yeah.
it's a very large group. Thanks, John. And again, it's not just media, like John said. Sometimes we have an event.
Mhm.
But again, please be courteous of the speakers and let them know what they're getting into. I have walked in on times when I thought I was talking to adults and they're little guys in middle school. And then I have to totally revamp what I was gonna say. They see a scary bald guy on fire that looks like a tomato about to burst. And it's like, I would have done things differently. I would have dressed differently, the whole shebang. So I want to thank Karrie and Laura. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Anytime.
And we're gonna keep fighting.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
I appreciate everything, and I'm gonna send my resources and different things I have in separate, since I don't know how to use the phone and Zoom at the same time.
Thank
But I
you so much.
appreciate
I don't
everybody's
blame you.
time.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
everybody for joining us.